The syringe trembled in Dr. Patricia Hawthorne's manicured hand as she prepared to inject herself with the same arthritis medication that had already killed 347 elderly patients across 12 states. "If you don't take that shot right now and prove the drug is safe," growled Vincent Torres, the hired assassin she had paid $3 million to eliminate whistleblower doctors. "I'm going to make sure you join them in the morgue tonight." What Dr. Hawthorne didn't know was that Uncle Sam had been working as a night janitor in her penthouse office building for 6 months, systematically documenting her murder conspiracy while FBI agents listened to every word through surveillance equipment I had planted in her private conference room. You see, I wasn't just any janitor cleaning corporate offices. I was working undercover to expose the most murderous pharmaceutical conspiracy in American history. A scheme so diabolical that it involved ordering the assassination of honest doctors who tried to warn the public about medications that were designed to kill rather than heal. Dr. Patricia Hawthorne, CEO of Medicore Pharmaceuticals, had discovered that her company's revolutionary new arthritis drug was causing massive heart attacks in patients over 65, but instead of recalling the medication, she had hired professional killers to eliminate anyone who threatened to expose the truth. Before I tell you how I infiltrated this medical murder conspiracy and gathered evidence that would send the pharmaceutical CEO to death row, let me ask you something that might terrify you. Have you or a loved one ever taken medication without questioning whether the drug company cared more about profits than your life? Drop your city in the comments and tell me about any experiences you've had with medications that seem to cause more problems than they solved. Because what you're about to hear will change how you think about the pharmaceutical industry forever. Now, if you'll forgive me, I need to take a moment to settle my nerves before diving into this story. Even after all these years, recounting cases where corporate greed led to deliberate murder still affects me deeply. At my age, having witnessed so much evil disguised as legitimate business, I sometimes wonder how people can sleep at night knowing they've chosen money over human lives. But thank you for staying with an old janitor who believes these stories need to be told, no matter how disturbing they might be. To understand how Dr. Patricia Hawthorne transformed from respected medical researcher, cold-blooded killer, we need to go back 3 years to when Medicore Pharmaceuticals was facing potential bankruptcy due to a series of failed drug trials and mounting legal liabilities. The company had invested over $2 billion developing medications that either didn't work or caused severe side effects, and their stock price had fallen from $847 per share to less than $12. Patricia Hawthorne had built her reputation as a brilliant biochemist who could develop breakthrough medications faster and cheaper than her competitors, but her methods had always involved cutting corners on safety testing and manipulating clinical trial data to hide dangerous side effects. For 15 years, she had managed to avoid serious consequences through bribery, intimidation, and legal maneuvering, but Medicore's latest financial crisis required something more drastic. The drug that would become her murder weapon was originally developed as a treatment for severe rheumatoid arthritis in younger patients, but early testing revealed that it caused dangerous cardiac irregularities in people over 50. Rather than abandoning the project, Patricia saw an opportunity to solve two problems simultaneously. Medicore needed a blockbuster drug to restore investor confidence, and the healthcare system was spending billions caring for elderly patients with chronic conditions. Patricia's twisted logic was economically elegant and morally monstrous. If the arthritis medication killed elderly patients quickly, it would appear to be treating their joint pain while secretly reducing long-term healthcare costs. Insurance companies would save billions on chronic care, families would inherit earlier, and Medicore would profit from both drug sales and reduce liability for long-term side effects. The clinical trials were deliberately designed to hide the cardiac risks by excluding patients over 65 and using monitoring protocols that wouldn't detect heart problems until weeks after the medication was discontinued. When the drug was approved by the FDA-based falsified safety data, Patricia knew that elderly patients would begin dying within months of starting treatment. But she had calculated that the deaths would appear to be natural age-related cardiac events rather than medication-induced murders. My involvement in exposing this pharmaceutical conspiracy began when my own sister, Maria Santos, was prescribed the arthritis medication after complaining about joint pain to her doctor. Maria was 73 years old, active and healthy despite her arthritis, with no history of heart problems. 3 weeks after starting the medication, she collapsed while grocery shopping and died of massive cardiac arrest before the ambulance could reach the hospital. Maria's death devastated our family. But what made me suspicious was the pattern. I began searched other patients who had died after taking the same medication. The deaths were always classified as natural cardiac events. The victims were always over 65, and the timing was always within 4 to 6 weeks of starting treatment. When I tried to report these patterns to medical authorities, I was told that correlation didn't prove causation, and that elderly people naturally had higher rates of heart problems. That is when I decided to use my decades of investigative experience to find out whether Medicory Pharmaceuticals knew about the deadly side effects and was deliberately covering them up. Getting close to Patricia Hawthorne required infiltrating her world without arousing suspicion, which meant finding a job that would give me access to her office while keeping me invisible to corporate security. Medicore's headquarters occupies 30 through 45 of a prestigious downtown tower, with Patricia's executive suite on the top floor featuring panoramic city views and security systems that rivaled the military installations. The building's cleaning contract was handled by a subsidiary company that employed dozens of night janitors, most of whom were older immigrants who spoke limited English and were essentially invisible to the wealthy executives who worked there. Getting hired as a night janitor required suppressing my education and experience while presenting myself as someone who desperately needed work but posed no security threat. I created a backstory as a retired factory worker whose pension had been lost in corporate bankruptcy, leaving me with no choice but to take whatever employment I could find. The building security company hired me without extensive background checks, assuming that a 70-year-old man with a janitor's cart couldn't possibly be a threat to corporate secrets. My first month working in Medicore's offices was spent learning the building's layout, security protocols, and the schedules of key executives. Patricia Hawthorne typically worked late into the evening, often staying until midnight to conduct what she called sensitive business meetings that couldn't be held during normal hours. These late-night sessions were where she discussed the most confidential aspects of her pharmaceutical conspiracy. The breakthrough in my investigation came when I discovered that Patricia's conference room contained a hidden safe built into the wall behind a painting of medical pioneers. During one of my cleaning sessions, I noticed that the painting was slightly askew, and when I straightened it, I accidentally triggered the hidden latch that revealed the safe's electronic lock panel. Getting into that safe required patience and observation skills I had developed during decades of corporate investigation. Over several weeks, I watched Patricia open the safe during late-night meetings, memorizing the sequence of numbers she entered while pretending to empty trash cans on the other side of the room. The combination was her late mother's birthday, followed by the molecular weight of the deadly compound in her arthritis medication, a detail that revealed the depth of her psychological connection to her murderous scheme. What I found in that safe exceeded my worst expectations and provided evidence of criminal conspiracy that reached far beyond a single pharmaceutical company. Patricia had been keeping detailed records of every aspect of her murder plot, including lists of targeted patients' payments to corrupt doctors who prescribed the medication to elderly patients, and most damning of all, contracts with professional assassins hired to eliminate anyone who threatened to expose the truth. The safe contained bank statements showing payments totaling over $15 million to shell companies controlled by Vincent Torres, a former military contractor who specialized in making murders appear to be accidents or natural deaths. Torres had been hired to eliminate 12 doctors, 3 nurses, 2 pharmacists, and 1 medical journalist who had begun investigating this suspicious pattern of cardiac deaths among elderly arthritis patients. But the most chilling document in Patricia's safe was a handwritten journal where she recorded her thoughts and calculations about the murder conspiracy. The entries revealed a mind completely disconnected from normal human empathy, viewing elderly patients not as people but as economic problems to be eliminated efficiently. Each eliminated patient saves the healthcare system approximately $847,000. In lifetime costs, she had written, the medication serves as a humane euthanasia method that appears natural while generating profits. Reading those journal entries while standing in Patricia's private office at 2 a.m., surrounded by medical degrees and humanitarian awards, was one of the most disturbing experiences of my investigative career. Here was someone who had taken an oath to, first, do no harm, but had instead become a serial killer who used her medical expertise to commit mass murder while maintaining the appearance of legitimate pharmaceutical research. Let me pause here for a moment to collect myself. Even now, years later, thinking about Patricia's complete abandonment of medical ethics still makes my hands shake with anger and disgust. In my decades of investigating corporate crime, I had seen plenty of greed and corruption, but I had never encountered someone who could plan mass murder with the cold calculation that most people reserve for financial investments. Please bear with an old man who still believes that some evils are so profound they deserve to be remembered and condemned by every generation. My investigation took a dangerous turn when I discovered that Patricia was planning to expand her murder conspiracy beyond arthritis medication to include treatments for diabetes, blood pressure, and depression. Medications that would allow her to systematically eliminate elderly patients across multiple medical conditions while generating billions in pharmaceutical profits. The expansion plan was outlined in documents I photographed during one of my late-night evidence gathering sessions. Patricia intended to create what she called therapeutic euthanasia protocols that would use combinations of medications to cause fatal interactions that appeared to be natural complications of age-related health problems. The ultimate goal was to reduce the elderly population by 30% over 5 years while convincing families that their loved ones had died from natural causes. But Patricia's most terrifying innovation was her plan to recruit corrupt doctors who would specifically target elderly patients from wealthy families, ensuring that the murders would not only reduce healthcare costs, but also accelerate inheritance transfers that could be taxed and invested in pharmaceutical stocks. She had calculated that combining murder with financial manipulation could generate over $50 billion in profits while reducing government healthcare expenditures by hundreds of billions. The evidence I was gathering required coordination with federal authorities, who could act on the information without alerting Patricia to the investigation. Working through contacts I had developed during previous corporate investigations, I reached out to FBI agents who specialized in healthcare fraud and pharmaceutical crimes. The challenge was convincing them that a janitor had uncovered evidence of mass murder that had eluded medical professionals and regulatory agencies. Agent Sarah Chen, a veteran investigator with the FBI's healthcare fraud unit, initially treated my allegations with skepticism, but agreed to review the evidence I had photographed and recorded. When she saw Patricia's journal entries detailing the murder conspiracy and the financial records proving payments to assassins, she immediately escalated the case to the Bureau's Organized Crime Task Force and requested authorization for a comprehensive surveillance operation. The FBI's investigation revealed that Patricia's murder conspiracy was even more extensive than my evidence had suggested. Vincent Torres's assassination network had been operating for over 18 months, eliminating not only medical professionals who threatened to expose the arthritis medication's deadly effects, but also regulatory officials, journalists, and even family members of victims who asked too many questions about their loved one's sudden death. The surveillance operation required me to continue working as Patricia's night janitor while wearing recording devices and installing hidden cameras throughout her executive offices. The FBI needed evidence of Patricia personally ordering murders and discussing the details of her conspiracy, which required capturing her private conversations during late-night meetings with Vincent Torres and other conspirators. The most dangerous phase of my undercover work began when Patricia started becoming suspicious about information leaks that were allowing patients and doctors to connect arthritis medication with cardiac deaths. She suspected that someone with access to her private offices was gathering evidence, and she instructed Vincent Torres to investigate everyone who had contact with her confidential documents, including the cleaning staff. Vincent Torres was not someone to underestimate. His military background included special operations training in surveillance, interrogation, and elimination techniques that made him extremely dangerous to anyone he suspected of betraying his employers. When he began investigating the night janitors who worked in Patricia's building, I knew that my cover identity was unlikely to survive close scrutiny. The confrontation that would expose Patricia as murder conspiracy began when Torres discovered that one of the hidden cameras I had, INSTAL LED, was transmitting data to FBI surveillance teams positioned outside the building. Rather than immediately arresting me, the FBI decided to use Torres' discovery as an opportunity to gather evidence of patricianally ordering my assassination, which would provide the strongest possible proof of her willingness to commit murder to protect her conspiracy. The plan required me to continue working normally while Torres and his team prepared to eliminate what they believed was a security threat to their operation. FBI agents were positioned throughout the building to intervene before I could be harmed. But the strategy was extremely risky because it required allowing Torres to begin implementing Patricia's murder order before agents could act. The night that would end Patricia's murder conspiracy began at 11:30 p.m. when she called an emergency meeting with Vincent Torres to discuss permanently resolving the security problem. I was cleaning offices on the floor below her penthouse suite when FBI agents confirmed, through surveillance equipment, that she was about to order my assassination. What Patricia didn't know was that every word of her conversation with Torres was being recorded through multiple hidden devices, and that FBI tactical teams were already in position to arrest everyone involved in her conspiracy. The surveillance had also revealed the locations where Torres stored the weapons and equipment he used for assassinations, providing evidence that would connect him to the murders of medical professionals who had threatened to expose the arthritis medication as deadly effects. The meeting I witnessed through hidden cameras was a masterclass in criminal arrogance and medical evil. Patricia discussed my elimination with the same clinical detachment she might use to discuss removing a cancerous tumor, viewing my investigation as nothing more than a business problem that required a permanent solution. The janitor has seen too much and knows too much, Patricia told Torres while reviewing photographs of evidence I had gathered from her private safe. His investigation threatens everything we've built, and we can't afford to let him destroy billions in profits. Because he is sentimental about a few elderly patients who were going to die anyway. Torres nodded and outlined his plan for making my death appear to be an accident involving cleaning chemicals that would suggest I had accidentally poisoned myself while working alone in the building. The plan was sophisticated and would likely have succeeded in concealing murder as occupational accident, except that FBI agents were recording every detail while preparing to intervene. But the most damaging evidence came when Patricia personally approved the murder and provided Torres with additional payment for ensuring that my death would appear completely accidental. I wanted to look like natural causes or a workplace accident, she insisted. We can't afford any investigation that might lead back to our other eliminations or expose the medication program. The FBI tactical team moved in at exactly 12:47, just as Torres was preparing to leave Patricia's office to implement her murder order. The arrests were swift and coordinated, with agents simultaneously raiding Torres' weapons storage facilities and the offices where Patricia kept records of her murder conspiracy. Patricia's reaction to being arrested was a mixture of outrage and disbelief that her carefully planned conspiracy had been exposed by someone she viewed as an insignificant janitor. "You have no idea what you've done?" she screamed at me as FBI agents led her away in handcuffs. Those people were going to die anyway, and at least my way they served a useful purpose in advancing medical science and economic efficiency. The Evidence seized during the raids was comprehensive and devastating. FBI agents recovered detailed records of 347 murders committed using the arthritis medication, financial documents proving payments for assassination services, and Patricia S. personal journal documenting her complete plan for using pharmaceutical products to commit systematic genocide against elderly patients. The federal charges against Patricia Hawthorne were among the most serious ever filed against a pharmaceutical executive. 347 counts of premeditated murder, conspiracy to commit mass murder, healthcare fraud, racketeering, and conspiracy to commit domestic terrorism. Each murder charge carried a potential death sentence, and the prosecution made it clear they would seek the maximum penalty for every crime. Vincent Torres and his assassination network were charged with carrying out the murders of medical professionals who had threatened to expose the conspiracy, along with additional charges for the planned murder of federal investigators. The evidence against Torres included weapons used in assassinations, communications with Patricia detailing murder orders, and financial records proving payments for elimination services. The trial became a landmark case in pharmaceutical crime prosecution, with victims' families testifying about loved ones who had died after taking medication they trusted to improve their health. Medical experts explained how Patricia had deliberately designed the arthritis medication to cause fatal cardiac events while appearing to treat joint pain, making her crimes a particularly cruel form of medical murder. My testimony as the undercover janitor who had exposed the conspiracy was crucial in demonstrating how Patricia had used her medical expertise and corporate position to commit mass murder while maintaining the appearance of legitimate pharmaceutical research. The recordings I had gathered provided undeniable proof of her personal involvement in ordering assassinations and planning systematic elimination of elderly patients. The jury deliberated for less than 8 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all charges against both Patricia Hawthorne and Vincent Torres. Patricia was sentenced to death by lethal injection for her role in murdering 347 patients, while Torres received multiple life sentences without possibility of parole for his assassination activities. But the impact of exposing Patricia's murder conspiracy extended far beyond individual prosecutions. The case led to comprehensive reforms in pharmaceutical testing, FDA oversight, and criminal penalties for medical professionals who deliberately harm patients for financial gain. Medicori Pharmaceuticals was dissolved and its assets were distributed to victims' families, while new legislation required independent monitoring of all clinical trials and mandatory reporting of suspicious patient death patterns. The pharmaceutical industry implemented new ethical standards designed to prevent future conspiracies like Patricia's systematic murder program. Years later, I continued working as an investigative consultant specializing in healthcare fraud. But Patricia S. case remained the most disturbing example of how medical expertise could be perverted into a tool for mass murder. The case served as a reminder that trusting pharmaceutical companies requires vigilant oversight, and that profit motives must never be allowed to override the fundamental medical principle of protecting patient welfare. The families of Patricia's victims found some measure of justice in her prosecution, but the emotional scars of losing loved ones to deliberate medical murder could never be fully healed. Many of them became advocates for pharmaceutical reform and patient safety, working to ensure that Patricia S. crimes would serve as a permanent warning about the dangers of unchecked corporate power in healthcare. As I reflect on this case, I'm struck by how Patricia's complete abandonment of medical ethics revealed the potential for educated, respected professionals to become mass murderers when profit motives override fundamental human decency. Her willingness to kill elderly patients while maintaining the facade of medical care represented a form of evil that was particularly disturbing because it exploited society's trust in healthcare providers. The investigation also demonstrated the importance of having people in positions where they can observe and document corporate crimes, even when those positions seem insignificant. My work as a night janitor provided access to evidence that more traditional investigators might never have discovered, proving that justice sometimes comes from the most unexpected sources. So, what do you think about the pharmaceutical industry and the medications you've been prescribed? Have you ever questioned whether drug companies truly have your best interests in mind? Or have you experienced side effects that seemed suspicious? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Tell me what city you're rewatching from and share any experiences you've had with medications that made you wonder about the true motives of pharmaceutical companies. But before you go, I need to tell you about Uncle Sam's next investigation because it involves something that will destroy your faith in friendship and business partnerships forever. Picture this: a tech startup founder who discovered that his business partner and best friend had been secretly selling their revolutionary AI technology to Chinese competitors while planning to steal his wife and destroy his marriage from the inside. Make sure you're subscribed and hit that notification bell because Uncle Sam's next story exposes. I witnessed a tech founder's best friend steal his company and his wife. My evidence exposed the ultimate Silicon Valley betrayal. The lesson from Patricia Hawthorne's case remains clear. When we entrust our health and lives to medical professionals, we must never assume that their expertise guarantees their integrity. Because sometimes the people who have sworn to heal us are the same ones who have chosen to harm us for money. And sometimes it takes a night janitor with a mop and a hidden camera to expose the truth that could save thousands of lives. From those who would murder us while pretending to cure us.